The past is never buried. It waits. And in the world of the Duttons, the past doesn't whisper. It roars. Just when fans thought they had uncovered every secret behind the legacy, a new chapter rises from the ashes of war, blood, and sacrifice. Yellowstone 1944 Inches isn't just another prequel. It's the origin of the scars, the grudges, and the ruthless code that shaped the ranch forever. The official first look has dropped, and it reveals a darker, heavier story. One where the battlefield isn't only overseas, it's right at home. Because while the world was fighting World War II, the Dutton family was fighting for survival, land, and legacy. Section 1. Set against the brutal backdrop of 1944, this story dives deep into one of the most dangerous and transformative periods in the Dutton bloodline. The war has taken the strongest men away from home, leaving the ranch vulnerable, not just to economic pressure, but to predators circling the land. This first look establishes a tense atmosphere where fear and responsibility sit on every shoulder. The generation running the ranch now isn't the one we're used to. They are younger, less experienced, but forced to grow up fast. Every decision carries life or death consequences, and the weight of the Yellowstone legacy feels heavier than ever. What makes this era so gripping is how the outside wall mirrors the internal one. With resources stretched thin, enemies see opportunity. Rival landowners, corporate cattle interests, and opportunistic politicians begin testing the ranch's borders. The trailer hints that legal battles won't be enough this time. Survival may require the same violence soldiers are using overseas. The tone is colder, more desperate. This isn't prosperity, it's endurance. We also see how war changes the Dutton men who return home. They don't come back as the same cowboys who left. They carry trauma, discipline, and a willingness to do whatever it takes to protect what's theirs. This psychological shift is. The production design teased in the trailer reinforces this heaviness. Everything feels harsher. Darker winters, dust-choked summers, and a ranch that looks worn by time and stress. Even the landscapes feel like characters, reflecting isolation and danger. The sense that help is far away, and that the Duttons stand alone, builds suspense throughout the first look. Another key thread introduced is the idea of legacy under threat. This isn't just about keeping land, it's about preserving identity. The ranch represents power, history, and future generations yet to come. Losing it in 1944 wouldn't just mean financial ruin. It would erase the Dutton name from Montana's map. That existential fear drives every choice, every alliance, and every act of violence teased in the footage. The trailer also hints at fractures within the family itself. War doesn't just create heroes, it creates disagreements. Different visions for survival begin clashing. Some believe in negotiation and adaptation. Others believe in domination. This ideological divide sets up internal conflict that may prove just as dangerous as outside enemies. Because history has shown the greatest threats to the Duttons often come from within. By the end of this first look, one thing becomes clear. Yellowstone 1944 Inches is not a story of comfort or nostalgia. It's a story of transformation. The ranch we recognize in later timelines, powerful, feared, unyielding, is being forged here through loss, brutality, and impossible choices. Every sacrifice made in this era becomes the foundation of the empire that follows. And if this first glimpse is any indication, the fight for Yellowstone in 1944 won't just shape the family's future. It will define their soul forever. If the first look establishes fear, the second layer of the trailer builds escalation. Because 1944 isn't just testing the Duttons, it's cornering them. The pressure on the ranch intensifies as new power players emerge, sensing weakness in a family stretched thin by war. What makes this chapter so suspenseful is that the threats are no longer distant or subtle. They're organized, calculated, and relentless. Land developers backed by wartime industry money begin pushing into Montana with one goal: expansion at any cost. And the Yellowstone sits directly in their path. The footage suggests a shift from defensive survival to strategic warfare. The Duttons realize that holding ground isn't enough anymore. They must outthink, outmaneuver, and if necessary, outfight enemies who don't play by traditional ranching rules. Contracts, backdoor deals, political leverage. This is a new battlefield, one where bullets aren't always fired from guns, but from signatures on paper. And the family quickly learns that losing a legal war can be just as devastating as losing a physical one. This section of the story also deepens the emotional toll of World War II on the ranch. Letters from the front lines arrive carrying both hope and dread. Every envelope could bring relief or heartbreak. The uncertainty eats away at the family, especially as decisions must still be made without knowing who will return home. Leadership becomes fragmented. Authority shifts, and with every absence, opportunists grow bolder. But what truly raises the tension is the transformation happening within the next generation of Dutton men. Those who return bring back more than survival stories. They bring a hardened worldview. War has stripped away hesitation. The trailer hints that mercy, once a family value, begins fading during this period. Justice becomes harsher. Retaliation becomes quicker. The famous Yellowstone ruthlessness isn't born from greed. It's born from trauma and necessity. We also see Al. By the midpoint of the trailer's narrative arc, one thing is undeniable. The war overseas may end, but the war for Yellowstone is only beginning. Enemies are multiplying. Resources are dwindling. And the family is changing in ways that can never be undone. This section builds toward an unavoidable realization. 1944 is the year the Duttons stop reacting and start becoming feared. Not because they want to, but because history is leaving them no other choice. Section 3. By the time the trailer reaches its final stretch, the tone shifts from tension to inevitability. Everything teased so far, the war, the land disputes, the internal fractures, now begins colliding at once. 1944 is no longer just a test of endurance for the Dutton family. It becomes the year that decides what they are willing to become in order to survive. Because the threats surrounding the ranch are no longer circling, they're closing in. This section of the first look builds suspense by showing how every earlier decision carries consequences. Rivals who were once negotiating are now mobilizing. Political figures who once applied pressure are now enabling force. Corporate interests, empowered by wartime expansion, are done waiting. The message is clear. Sell or be taken. And for the Duttons, surrender has never been an option. What raises the stakes even higher is the sense that the ranch itself is becoming a battlefield. Protection of land turns militarized. Patrols increase. Defenses tighten. And trust becomes scarce. The family realizes that the tactics used in global war are now echoing at home. Strategy, surveillance, retaliation. Survival demands preparation on every front. The Yellowstone is no longer just a ranch. It's a fortress under siege. Emotionally, this section hits hardest through the cost of that transformation. The trailer hints that not everyone in the family agrees with the path forward. Some still believe there's a line that shouldn't be crossed. Others argue that once defined it. The returning soldiers play a critical role in this final escalation. War has conditioned them for violence, but applying that mindset to their own land changes them even further. The first look suggests that acts committed in the name of protection will leave permanent marks, not just on the ranch's history, but on the souls of those who carry them out. This is where the Yellowstone Code hardens into something colder, more absolute. Another layer teased is sacrifice. The trailer builds the feeling that victory, if it comes, won't be without loss. Whether through battle, betrayal, or the emotional toll of leadership, the Duttons will pay a price. Legacy, after all, is never built for free. Every acre defended demands something in return. Loyalty, morality, even humanity. The women's strength reaches its peak here as well. They're no longer reacting to crisis. They're shaping outcomes, standing beside the men, making impossible calls, and proving that survival of the Yellowstone legacy depends on unity across the family. Their resolve reinforces the idea that the ranch isn't protected by one leader, but by a collective will hardened through hardship. Visually, the closing moments of the trailer lean into finality. vast landscapes shadowed by uncertainty, the ranch standing defiant against forces trying to erase it. The imagery suggests that while enemies may come with money, power, and numbers, the Duttons possess something far more dangerous: generational resolve. And that leads into the biggest question teased by this first look. What will be left of the family once the fight is over? Because survival and preservation are not the same. The Yellowstone may endure, but the people defending it may never be the same again. The release date reveal at the end of the trailer lands with weight, not just excitement. It promises a story where legacy is reforged in fire, where the foundations of everything seen in later generations are cement. As the trailer's final narrative layer unfolds, the scale of the story expands beyond land and war. It becomes about destiny. Everything that has been building throughout 1944 now feels like it's moving toward a single, irreversible turning point. The enemies surrounding the ranch are no longer experimenting with pressure. They are executing final moves. Legal traps tighten, armed intimidation escalates, and the Duttons realize that this confrontation was never avoidable. It was always coming. What heightens the suspense in this closing stretch is the sense of time running out. Winter approaches, resources thin, and isolation deepens. The ranch feels cut off from the rest of the world, forced to rely only on its own strength. The trailer emphasizes that nature itself becomes an additional adversary. Harsh weather, failing supply lines, and the physical exhaustion of defending land without relief. Survival isn't just about defeating enemies. It's about enduring conditions designed to break even the strongest families. This section also sharpens the generational theme. The older Dutton leaders, worn down by responsibility, begin preparing the next generation to take control, not ceremonially, but through fire. Leadership is no longer taught through guidance alone. It's taught through confrontation, sacrifice, and harsh reality. The first look suggests that the heirs to Yellowstone aren't given power. They're forced to prove they can hate. This section also sharpens the generational theme. The older Dutton leaders, worn down by responsibility, begin preparing the next generation to take control, not ceremonially, but through fire. Leadership is no longer taught through guidance alone. It's taught through confrontation, sacrifice, and harsh reality. The first look suggests that the heirs to Yellowstone aren't given power. They're forced to prove they can hold it. The psychological transformation reaches its peak here. Fear begins turning into calculation. Compassi. As the trailer reaches its final crescendo, the story of Yellowstone 1944 inches shifts from mere survival to the shaping of destiny itself. Every thread teased so far, war, betrayal, internal conflict, and the relentless push to defend the land, now converges into a tense climax that defines the family for generations to come. The Duttons are no longer just a family struggling to hold their ranch. They are becoming a force of nature, an unyielding entity forged in fire, fear, and unbreakable will. The first look gives a clear message. This is the crucible where the Yellowstone legacy is truly born. The trailer suggests that the stakes have never been higher. Enemies are relentless, and the options for compromise have disappeared. Rival families, opportunistic businessmen, and even local authorities are shown applying pressure in ways that threaten to destroy everything the Duttons have built. The tension isn't only external. The family itself is under strain, as decisions that would have once been unimaginable must now be made without hesitation. Every action carries consequences that ripple far into the future, and the sense of inevitability hangs over every scene. Central to this final section is the transformation of the Dutton men and women. The next generation, shaped by the horrors and challenges of the era, begins to embrace a ruthless philosophy. Loyalty above all, strength over mercy, survival over sentiment. The trailer hints that these choices are not born of cruelty, but of necessity. The hardships, sacrifices, and impossible decisions of 1944 lay the foundation for the unflinching Yellowstone family code that viewers have come to know. The code that demands respect, instills fear, and ensures the family's dominance. Emotional tension is heightened by the portrayal of sacrifice. The trailer teases that protecting the ranch will come at a cost: broken relationships, personal loss, and moral compromise.